Now, with a roundup of all the latest headlines and updates this Monday afternoon, it's the ITV Lunchtime News.
Good afternoon, I'm Gamal Fahnbulleh. International condemnation for alleged war crimes in Ukraine is growing, with the French president now joining other world leaders calling for more sanctions against Russia. The Russian retreat from areas around Kyiv has laid bare an apparent catalogue of atrocities. There are suggestions of torture, sexual violence and mass executions being committed by Kremlin troops. Our correspondent John Ray has this report from Odessa.
The simple phrase war crime seems inadequate to describe the horrors revealed amid the wreckage of war north of Kyiv as Russian forces retreated. They are scenes too disturbing to broadcast. Ukrainian prosecutors say they have recovered 410 bodies, many with hands tied, shot at close range, some showing signs of torture. This satellite image from the town of Bucha reveals a long, freshly dug trench in the grounds of a church. It has been identified as a mass grave. There has been a wave of international revulsion and calls for a new round of sanctions from French President Emmanuel Macron. We are extremely shocked, he said. There is clear evidence of war crimes, and those who committed these crimes will have to answer for them. Yet Russia denies responsibility. It calls the killings a staged Ukrainian performance, a provocation to disrupt peace talks.
We're all free.
Overnight, President Zelensky addressed the Grammy Awards in Las Vegas.
Over 400 children have been injured and 153 children died.
He's denounced the Russians as murderers and rapists. There have been more Russian strikes overnight on targets in Odessa after missiles hit this oil storage facility in the Black Sea port, and in the nearby city of Mykolaiv, where the death toll from the attack on the headquarters of civilian government in the region has risen to 36. The Russian Defense Ministry released these pictures to demonstrate its air power. After their withdrawal from Kyiv, it is refocusing its offensives on the east. In Luhansk, where separatist forces allied to Moscow spearhead the attack against elite Ukrainian troops. And in Mariupol, where victory for the Russians will not only give them a land corridor to the Crimea, but also free up soldiers to join other battles. The siege there has obscured the true scale of suffering among civilians trapped behind the lines. But if the atrocities apparently carried out around Kyiv are a guide, then the question is what other war crimes have been committed in Ukraine and remain undiscovered. John Ray, ITV News, Odessa.
Well, let's speak to Geraint Vincent, who's in Lviv this lunchtime. And Geraint, we heard from President Macron there. What has the other reaction been internationally?
Universal condemnation, really, Gamal. This from Poland's Prime Minister. The massacres being committed by Russian soldiers deserve to be called by their name, and it is genocide. Boris Johnson describing what he's seen as despicable attacks, and the American Secretary of State Tony Blinken said that seeing those pictures of bodies in the street was like a punch in the gut. Particularly chilling revelation, or accusation I should say, from MI6, Britain's Secret Intelligence Service, that summary executions were all part of the invasion plan as conceived by Vladimir Putin. Ukraine has of course been saying that Russia is guilty of war crimes for weeks now, that is in the type of weapons and munitions that it's been using in civilian areas, and its deliberate targeting of shelters that people are using to try to survive the bombardments. Now, if members of the Russian armed forces are guilty of war crimes, what are the chances of anybody ever being brought to justice or even appearing in an international court, well, they seem very small at this moment. The government in Moscow is not going to extradite any individuals. Ukraine has opened a case against Russia at the International Court of Justice, but the rulings of that court are enforced by the UN Security Council, of which, of course, Russia is a permanent member, and it has a veto over any decision or vote that the Council takes.
Harrowing stuff. OK, Geraint, thank you. Labour are calling on the Prime Minister to resign after police issued fines to some of the people who went to an event at Downing Street the night before Prince Philip's funeral. The Prime Minister himself has not been fined. The Met Police investigation of 12 events, which took place during lockdown, began in January after an inquiry by senior civil servant Sue Gray. Libby Weiner is in Westminster. And Libby, what is the latest?
Well, Labour do see this as a resignation issue for the Prime Minister, saying that he's lost all moral authority. But perhaps not surprisingly, that's not how Number 10 sees it. The Prime Minister's official spokesman today saying that he wasn't aware whether the Prime Minister himself had been issued with a fine, and saying that Boris Johnson only wanted to comment at the conclusion of this process. That said, he did acknowledge that there was strong feeling about the issue, and that's why the Prime Minister had apologised to Parliament and had also admitted that mistakes had been made. Nevertheless, cabinet ministers who've been out on the airwaves this morning have been defending the Prime Minister, suggesting that the world has moved on. Simon Hart, the Welsh Secretary, I spoke to him. He said none of his constituents were calling for the Prime Minister's resignation, although he did say that reports that there was karaoke at one party in the Cabinet Office made him uncomfortable, and he suggested it did not look clever. I think in normal times, this would be very damaging for the Prime Minister. But as we've just been hearing, these are not normal times. The war in Ukraine is likely to last several more months, if not years. And I think that the Prime Minister saying that there are important issues that he needs to focus on is something that certainly his cabinet now accept as absolutely critical, and most of the Conservative Party. Of course, that could change if there are further revelations.
Libby, thank you. In the last few minutes, it's been announced the actress June Brown has died at the age of 95. She played the character Dot Cotton in EastEnders for more than 30 years, appearing in more than 2,800 episodes. Her colleagues from Albert Square have paid tribute, saying June created one of the most iconic characters in television. They go on to say June was loved and adored by everyone at EastEnders. Her loving warmth, wit and great humour will never be forgotten. A campaign to make credit card and loan rates fairer has been launched in the face of the UK's cost of living crisis. Energy bills went up on Friday, and with many facing financial hardship, borrowing is likely to increase. Well, money-saving expert Martin Lewis joins us now. Martin, thank you for joining us this afternoon. What is this campaign all about?
Well, back in 2011, as part of the EU harmonisation rules, we moved from what's called typical rate APRs to representative rate APRs. And what that means is right now, if you apply for a loan or a credit card, only 51% of accepted applicants need to get the advertised rate. The rest can be charged more without any limit on top of it. And the problem with this is that means many people, especially in the midst of this cost of living crisis where we're seeing debt levels rise back up to near record levels, when they apply, they look at a rate, it might be 2.9%, they apply for it, they get accepted, and then they find out they're actually being charged 10%. And they've got a choice. They can either accept it and pay much more, or they can reject it, but their credit file is now marked. So getting another loan elsewhere will be more difficult, and it's anti-shopping around. So what we're calling on today, amongst a host of different recommendations, is to go back to what used to be called typical rate APRs. Then at least 66%, 2/3 of people applying must get the advertised rate. I put a dossier to the Chancellor on this, and he's agreed to ask the regulator to start to look into it. But ultimately, what we need is when you apply for a loan or a credit card, you should get the rate that's advertised, or you shouldn't get it at all. This is a move back towards that, so people have to stop making a stab in the dark when they're applying for loans and debt. And I know many of your viewers watching this right now will have had exactly this experience. They've applied for a loan, they've applied for a credit card, they've seen the rate that's advertised, and then they've got it and gone, what's this? Why am I being charged 5 times as much as it was advertised? It's time for that to stop.
In virtually every single area, Martin, what tips are there out there for people?
I'm so sorry, your question cut out. Would you ask again?
Sure, I was saying bills are going up in virtually every single area. What tips are out there for people to soften the blow somewhat?
I think what you have to do is don't look at the big picture because it's too frightening. So every single thing that you spend money on, you need to look and say, first of all, do I need to be spending money on it? And if you do, can I do it cheaper? Can I do it better? You know, take an easy example. There are 16 million people in the UK who are out of contract on their broadband, their home broadband, and on their mobile bills together. Most of those people could at least halve what they're paying, and on broadband you can get faster speeds too. The cheapest deals available there tend to be from comparison sites who have sign-up incentives that you won't get from going direct to the companies. But you know, the equivalent now, most people paying 30 to 45 quid a month for broadband at medium speeds, well, you can get for the equivalent of 17, 18 pounds a month, exactly the same, if not faster, suddenly putting 200 quid back into your coffers. If you're married right now, and one of you is a basic rate taxpayer and the other is a non-taxpayer, well, check out getting the marriage tax allowance, which allows the non-taxpayer to transfer some of their allowance to the taxpayer. And I do that one quickly because the tax year, the last day of this tax year is tomorrow. And if you get this in before tomorrow, then you can back claim 4 years. If you go wait a couple of days, you'll only be able to back claim 3 years from where we are now, three tax years. There's a lot to do, but go and do some work on it is the key answer.
Martin, always appreciate your time. Thank you. Now, travellers trying to get away ahead of the Easter holidays faced chaos this morning as airlines cancelled more than 100 flights. EasyJet and British Airways said cancellations were caused by COVID and staff absences. The Eurotunnel also warned of 3-hour delays after a broken down train. Sangeeta Lal is here with me. What is going on here?
Well, still a lot of disruption. Around 60 flights have been cancelled for EasyJet today. British Airways say around a handful of theirs have been grounded. Essentially all of that, both airlines blaming staff shortages because of COVID sickness. And it's worth remembering that while the rates remain so high in the country, more than 500,000 reported over the past week, it's affecting all industries, including clearly aviation. Now, on Friday, EasyJet preemptively, it says, cancelled flights, but that caused disruption in airports across the country. And not just on EasyJet passengers, but for other airlines too. So this was the situation in Manchester Airport on Friday. Huge queues caused huge delays for passengers who missed other flights as well. And it's the first school holidays since the travel restrictions ended for the pandemic. Of course, really frustrating for holidaymakers trying to get away. So what can they do? Well, I've spoken to the Civil Aviation Authority this morning. They say that passengers should be entitled to compensation, potentially £200 to £350 per person. But people have to check before they travel. And as you say, it's not just aviation that are experiencing delays, but rail too, with a broken down train in the Eurotunnel. Staff there say they're trying to remove it, but are running reduced services today. But of course, a very difficult start to the Easter holidays for many.
It certainly is incredibly difficult for people trying to get away. OK, Sangeeta, thank you. Returning to Ukraine now, and Russia's shells have been indiscriminate in their targets, impacting young and old alike. Over the last few weeks, buildings sheltering the country's younger civilians have been hit. Life for them has changed beyond all recognition. Ukrainian children have spoken to ITV News about their fears and their experience of the invasion.
For me to be happy again, I just want my normal life back. I just want my life back.
There is no food in the store. I'm scared.
I'm just terrified. You never know which house will be next to be bombed.
Every moment can start shelling, so we must be ready. My name is Alessia Skripka. I'm 11 years old. There's siren and scary noises. There is no much food in the store and shops. We are sleeping in basement. I want to live a normal life, like go to school, play outside. I'm scared.
Накопичилося повно люті, бо я почала розлюченою бути сильно. А тут я сумую за всім. За всім, що було колись у нормальному житті. За площею перемоги, з якої ми переїхали. Ще є за Васильом, за додому, за Мосію, що я їх кожен день так уже не бачу. За всім. Щоб Путін припинив оцю всю дурню.
My name is Victoria. I'm 13 years old. My life changed. Very huge thing happens in my life. I live in corridor, and sometimes I live in basement of our house because every moment can start shelling. I feel very upset and sad. I can't smile. I can't. I can't feel good.
My name is Ilona Tokreva. I'm 16 years old. We are listening all the time, all these thousands of bombs, of explosions, of these planes. And so right now I sleep in freezing cold and wet basement. I'm aware of all the news that are happening. I'm worried about my father who's in a territorial defense right now. I'm really scared. I'm just terrified. You never know which house will be next to be bombed. Which house will be next to be burnt, and what people will be next to be dead. I'm afraid of being killed the other day and any moment.
I don't want war. War is bad. Life is so scared, and sometimes it's explored near my house, and now my family sleep in one room so far from windows. It's scary, and sometimes I cry for my
have been added to the official NHS list, including headaches and a blocked nose. The list has been updated after COVID cases hit a record high in the UK. Well, throughout the pandemic, we've been joined by Dr. Sarah Jarvis, and she joins us now. Sarah, always great to chat to you. Firstly, what are these symptoms?
So a lot of the symptoms everybody knows about already, of course: fever, new or persistent cough, or loss of or change to your sense of smell or taste. But that last one in particular has not been common with Omicron. Other ones have been much more common. We're talking about runny or blocked nose, sore throat, loss of appetite, being off your food, in other words, for no apparent reason, feeling or being sick, having diarrhea, headache, feeling achy all over, feeling exhausted, or being short of breath.
This is all happening at a time when the COVID infection levels are at a record high. So how worried should we be?
Well, certainly they're not translating into hospitalizations, and certainly not into deaths in the way that they were in the first or even in the second wave. So we do know that, largely courtesy of vaccination, people are much less likely to become unwell, but you still can be quite poorly. We estimate about half the people who are in hospital are there with COVID, or diagnosed with COVID, are there because of COVID. And for the other half, it may well be affecting their care for the other medical conditions they're in with. So I do think, given that we've got higher levels now, in 1 in 13 in England, higher levels than we've had at any stage since we started testing, I think that we all should be really cautious.
And given that infection levels are so high and the symptoms are so similar to the common cold and flu, does it now strengthen the case about whether lateral flow tests should be free and widely available?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very, very difficult. If you know that you're supposed to stay off work for 5 days and you're not sure whether you've got COVID and your livelihood depends on it. We all know that in the last few days, prices have gone up worryingly for petrol, for gas, electricity, everything else. Are you really going to risk taking 5 days off if you're not going to be paid? I think it's going to be really difficult. And personally, it would be much easier for people to feel they were doing the right thing and taking time off and self-isolating if they knew they had COVID.
And 5 to 11-year-olds can now receive the COVID vaccination. What is your reaction to that? Is that the way forwards?
I think it is important that young people are vaccinated because they can pass it on, particularly to older and really vulnerable people. We know that the vaccine has a very, very low incidence of side effects. Myocarditis, inflammation of heart muscle, is the one that everyone was worried about. But we've now had millions of children. In fact, in the US, 8.7 million children aged 5 to 11 got the vaccine, and there were only 11 cases of inflammation of the heart muscle, most of them very mild. And of course, you can get that same inflammation more commonly if you get COVID than if you have the virus. So I think it will reduce the time off school for children, and I'm really hoping that it will be a way of keeping older, more vulnerable people safe.
Dr. Sarah Jarvis, appreciate your time. Thank you. And finally, award season continues, and last night Hollywood travelled to Las Vegas for the biggest night in music, the Grammys. As well as the usual glitz and glamour of a ceremony with the world's biggest music stars, there were tributes to the late Foo Fighters drummer Taylor Hawkins. Noel Phillips was there.
After a 3-month delay, music's biggest night was back with a bang. Not only did they open the ceremony, but Silk Sonic also picked up Song of the Year, beating the likes of Ed Sheeran and Brandi Carlile, who told me last week about her excitement in seeing women like Doja Cat and Jasmine Sullivan dominate this year's categories.
This is the year that Black women in America are completely taking back the genre that they created, which is roots music, country, Americana, and bluegrass.
The big award of the night went to John Baptiste for his album, We Are. Elsewhere, it was a bittersweet night for the Foo Fighters, who won 3 awards, just a week after the unexpected death of their drummer, Taylor Hawkins.
Yeah, looked like a great event. That is it for this lunchtime. Mary Nightingale will be here with the ITV Evening News at 6:30. The news where you are follows the national weather. From everyone here, many thanks indeed for watching. Enjoy your afternoon. Bye-bye for now. Goodbye.